Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use.
The series begins with the start of the new academic year at the university, where there is a welcoming party for new students. A new student named John attends, and all the girls are impressed by him because he is handsome, famous, and wealthy. However, despite having many followers on his social media pages, he actually feels lonely. We see another student at the same university named Yoon, and we learn that his financial situation is difficult and he works multiple jobs to the extent that he has no time for rest or love. We then meet a student named Jen, who is always in the library. Despite studying a lot, her grades are still poor. Then, the first day of classes begins. Jaein enters the lecture hall and all the girls are amazed by his handsome appearance. He sits behind a sleeping student, and when the professor enters for the lecture, he tries to wake him up but accidentally spills coffee on him. He apologizes and gives him a tissue, but the student isn't interested. After the lecture, he offers him money as compensation, but he refuses and leaves. John is surprised by his behavior, and his friend tells him that he doesn't care because he is like a robot. Then we see in the girls' dormitory as they arrange their belongings, hoping that their roommate will be nice, tidy, and sociable so they can get along well. She enters and she is surprised to find her very beautiful and with only one bag. She offers to help her and takes her to get the rest of her bags. Jen is surprised by the many bags. She tells herself why she restrained from offering help and continues to carry the bags until she's exhausted. At night, we see John staying up with his friends at a club, and it's evident that they accompany him to take advantage of him and have him pay the bill because he comes from a wealthy family. John enters a supermarket to buy drinks and notices Yun working there. He tries to get to know him and invites him to hang out, offering to pay the bill, but the person embarrasses him, saying not everything can be bought with money. Meanwhile, Jen stays up brainstorming projects for her university portfolio after graduation. However, Shia tells her she only sleeps in the darkness, forcing her to turn off the light. The next day, she goes to the secretary's office, and as she opens the door, she bumps into Jaein outside. She feels tense and embarrassed being close to the most famous student at the university. From the secretary, she learns that Jae took the project, leaving her with no option but to ask him for it. The secretary volunteers her for the new student trip, and Jen reluctantly agrees. She tells her friend, who laughs and teases her for having to clean up after the new students. The next day, she finds out he's volunteering alongside her, and she feels tense because he is the smartest student at the university and always receives scholarships. Then, the new students start to get to know each other, and Jaein notices that Jen looks at him a lot, thinking she might have a crush on him. At night, John sees her standing alone and approaches her, asking why she stares at him, but she gets nervous and embarrassed, saying her friend is calling her. Jaein then tries to get closer to Yun to become friends, but Yun ignores him, and he tells him he doesn't have time to socialize or go out with anyone. When everyone goes to sleep, he cleans the place and collects empty bottles. Jen goes to help him, mentioning that she sent him messages when they were together in social activities, but he didn't reply. He tells her he never received anything from her, making her feel embarrassed, so she leaves to go to bed. However, she sees John standing with his drunk friend who is arguing with him because the girl he likes is interested in John. His friend starts hitting him and Jen steps in to defend him, but his friend tries to hit her. Yoon interferes, knocking his friend to the ground, and asks her to treat John's wounds. Jen starts sterilizing his wound and takes the opportunity to ask him to give up the project. John thinks she defended him because of that, so he agrees, but on the condition that she becomes his closest friend. Jen is surprised by his request but reluctantly agrees. We see John before he sleeps going through his messages and finding Jen's messages, realizing she was telling the truth. The next day, he apologizes to her, saying he didn't mean to. After that, John asks Jen to play a game with him, but she refuses because she's scared of it. Jaein promises her that if she plays with him, he will give up the project as soon as they return. She reluctantly agrees, feeling tense and fearful. However, Jaein encourages her, telling her to trust him, and he takes her and swings her from above. Jen remains tense and scared while being held by John. He notices that someone is watching them while they play the game, and it seems that person is interested in them. Later, they return to the university, and Jen asks Jaein if he spoke to the secretary and gave up the project for her, but he tells her he forgot and promises to tell her the next day, leaving her and walking away. However, he is surprised to see his brother in front of him and learns that he has transferred to teach at the university. His brother asks him not to tell their parents. Yun is standing there watching them. At night, Yun is working at the supermarket, and his friend comes to him and asks him to treat her to a drink because she doesn't see him often due to his work. She tells him to take a break from his life routine and hang out with his friends who are in the same year. However, Yun has to do this because he relies on himself. We see him waking up early and not having slept much to the extent that he falls asleep on public transportation. He keeps running until he reaches the university on time. In the end, the lecture gets cancelled, and he regrets coming. John sees him and thanks him for helping him during the journey, but Yoon tells him he didn't do it for him and doesn't think they became friends. Jen arrives and finds them standing together, expecting them to argue, but Yoon leaves them and walks away. Jen is upset because John didn't keep his promise to her, thinking he deceived her, but John takes her and goes to the secretary, giving up the project for her. They realize they're in the same class. Jae-in is happy to see her often and walks with her in the rain, holding an umbrella over her the whole way. The next day, Jen wakes up and is surprised to find Ran sleeping on the floor. We learn that she's her roommate in the dorm. Her behavior is strange, asking for weird favors, and Jen reluctantly agrees because she's afraid of her. Later, Yun returns to his dorm and finds his younger brother there. Learning that he's applying to the police academy, he's upset because he won't be able to continue his studies and remembers their father, who was a policeman and died, leaving them alone when they were young. Since then, he has been relying on himself. Later, Jen goes to see a doctor about her project and asks her to do a specific analysis and present it to her. At night, Shayna is sitting upset and crying because her boyfriend wants to break up with her. She remembers his words when he said she looks good, but her personality isn't right for him. She returns to the dorm. Jen and Rahan talk to her and invite her to eat with them, but she refuses and goes to sleep. Meanwhile, John's friends go to his house and want to stay over. He refuses, but they enter and mess up the house. Jae-in is upset because he knows they're only hanging out with him for his money. The next day in class, he ignores them and sits next to Yun, bringing him coffee and trying to talk to him. However, Yun gets up and sits alone to get some sleep. The professor enters and asks them to form project teams. He tells them to divide into groups. John and his friends are in Yun's team. After class, Jen hesitates to join their team, but John insists that she agrees. He's excited to be with her and takes her number. The team gathers to discuss the project and they decide to make Yun the team leader. Then John receives a call from his mom telling him to come home because there's a family gathering with his uncle and aunt. From their conversation, we understand that she doesn't care about him and always prioritizes her brother over him. At night, she is deeply upset about her breakup and goes to the supermarket. The can falls from her, and she continues to cry. Yun sees her, helps her, and cleans the floor. She buys a drink and charges it to him, saying it's a gift for him, then runs off. Yun tries to follow her because he doesn't like anyone helping him, but she walks away. The next day, there's a team meeting, and Jen confirms with everyone to attend, but only John and Yun show up. Jen tries to talk to them, but they don't respond. Yun suggests kicking them out of the team and dividing the work among the three of them. However, Jae-in refuses, saying they must have valid reasons for not attending. Jen decides to divide the work among all of them, with her taking on tasks not done by others. As the team leader, she faces resistance from Yun, who insists on withdrawing and leaving them. When they follow him, they meet John's friends who are drunk. Yun tells them to take responsibility or they will be a burden on the team. They get agitated and try to fight him. John intervenes, trying to calm them down, but his friends hit him, causing him to fall to the ground, and they argue with Yun. John recalls his childhood memories of experiencing domestic violence and feeling helpless. He becomes agitated and cries, yelling to stop the argument.